Who are staying in here, we are going to continue our series that Pastor Colin started a few weeks ago. Journey to the Cross, Encounters with the King. Basically, anyone or anything that Jesus came in contact with in that week before the crucifixion, the death, burial, and resurrection, we're going to talk about that. And so this morning is no different. We're going to be talking from primarily the book of John, but in this story, it involves Peter, and a lot of people call it the denials of Peter, and it's recorded in all four Gospels. In these four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Holy Spirit inspired them to record the event, and it's a little bit different in each Gospel. So it's kind of like four camera angles recording and filming the same scene. You're going to get four different perspectives, but when you put it all together, it gives you the whole story. So this morning we're going to be primarily in the book of John. John 13 is where we're going to start. The denials are in chapter 18. But to understand the denials, you have to understand what came before it. What set it up? The denials don't stand alone on their own. So what set it up is this Thursday night, before the denials, this Thursday evening, the Last Supper in the upper room. You can go visit the upper room today and check out that site. In that room, Jesus gathers his disciples. This is their final major meal together. So he is going to give them very, very important, critically important information that night. John 13 through 17 is his communication of that information, called the Upper Room Discourse. And as he gets started, in John 13, he's starting to talk to the disciples and give them very important information about what it means to abide in him, what people will think if they don't love each other the way that they need to, the relationship between God, the Father. Peter kind of interrupts him. And it's really, if you think about it, it's really kind of classic Peter. He's kind of an act first, think later guy. And so in this situation, that's exactly what he does. So Jesus is communicating, John 13, Jesus is communicating information to the disciples. And here's Peter. Excuse me, Rabbi. Excuse me. Verse 36 of chapter 13. Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus answered, "Where I'm going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow later." Peter said to him, "Lord, why can't I follow you right now? I will lay down my life for you." Jesus replied, "Will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, a rooster will not crow until you deny me 3 times. Jesus will go on to finish that discourse through John 17. Finishes the evening, and they leave that upper room, head down across the Kidron Valley and up the slope of the Mount of Olives to the Garden of Gethsemane, right across from the temple. And in that garden, Mark 14 actually, this is why I love the 4 different camera angles of the Gospels. They help you put together the complete picture. So in Mark 14, we see that when they go over to the Mount of Olives, Jesus says, hey, I'm paraphrasing, "Hey guys, tonight, they're going to strike the shepherd, and the sheep are going to scatter. It's coming." And Peter over there kind of makes a big boast. He says, "Look, Jesus, Rabbi, even if all these others leave and abandon you, I never will. I got you. Won't happen with me." And Jesus reaffirms to him, yeah, you're going to deny me tonight 3 times. And so that's kind of the context of what we're going to see tonight in John 18 in the denials. So turn over to John 18. We'll get there here in just a second. But in the meantime, from that moment where he, again, is reaffirmed by Jesus, look, you're going to deny me tonight. And Peter says, no, even if everybody else takes off and leaves you, not me. I'm your guy. So in the meantime, the mob has come and they've arrested Jesus and taken him captive there. The disciples do scatter. And when they, before they scattered though, a very important detail, it's going to be important to our story this morning, Peter in vain tries to stop the arrest from happening. I mean, he's a fisherman, not a soldier. Just keep that in mind. But he draws his sword and vainly tries to stop the arrest from happening. And so somehow, I don't know the physics on this or how it happened, but when he drew his sword and struck, he somehow, the only thing he accomplished was cutting off the ear of the servant of the high priest, and the guy's name was Malchus. So he cut off Malchus's ear, and immediately, it's a weird scene. Jesus heals Malchus's ear, touches his ear, and heals it completely, tells Peter, hey, Peter, put your sword away. Put your sword down. Am I not supposed to drink the cup that the Father's appointed for me? And so then Jesus is carried by the mob back down the Kidron Valley and up again to a little bit south of the temple to where the high priest's house was. You can actually visit this site as well. It's very interesting. It's very clearly in the shadow of the temple. You can see it just northeast of you. So he's taken that night to be questioned by Annas, the father-in-law of the high priest, and the high priest Caiaphas. And in that situation, you would have probably an open area where he would be questioned. So out in the courtyard, a little bit below that, you could see what was going on and probably hear what's going on in the room as Jesus is being questioned. But the folks outside are not invisible or blind to what's happening on the inside. Does that make sense? That's kind of where we pick up our story. And let me get with you over in John 18 here. In John 18, we'll start in verse 15. So Jesus is being questioned, and Simon Peter was following Jesus, and so was another disciple. And that disciple was known to the high priest, and he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest, but Peter was standing at the door outside. This is kind of interesting to me. I like this. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the doorkeeper and brought Peter in. So the other disciple typically is understood to be John, the author of this gospel. So it looks like John and Peter go to the house of the high priest, and John just waltzes right in. And Peter's stuck at the gate. I'm sure that didn't go over well with Peter. Peter is a take charge, like to be in control, act first, think later, impulsive, but he's stuck at the gate. This is John's world. John's world. Somehow, his family knew the high priest family. He knew the high priest. There was a connection there that he could come in and out of that space with no problem. Peter, however, was a fisherman. Blue-collar culture, blue-collar work ethic, Sea of Galilee. I mean, John was a fisherman too, but somehow he had that relationship with the high priest. These were two different worlds colliding that night. Peter's world, Peter the fisherman, kind of seen as uncouth, uncivilized by high society of Judaism of the day. These two worlds are about to collide. And some might even say that the fisherman was a fish out of water in this environment. All right, we'll keep going. But Peter's very impulsive. Jesus has been arrested. I can't imagine what that's doing to his psyche. He's a defender. He wants to protect. He wants to take care of. He wants to be there for Jesus, but he can't in that moment. John lets him in. He gets him to leave him in, let him in there, talks to the doorkeeper. Then verse 17, then the slave woman who was the doorkeeper said to Peter, "You're not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now, the slaves and the officers were standing there, having made a charcoal fire, for it was cold, and they were warming themselves, and Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. This is the first opportunity. And swing and a miss, he denies him. He says in John, it says, "Are you his disciple?" He says, "I am not." "No, I'm not." In other records from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. You look in this passage, and he actually says the phrase, I don't even know what you're talking about. No, I'm not. I don't even know what you're talking about. So he's kind of taking it one step further a little bit. And Mark records that after this comment, after this first denial, Peter, no, I don't know what you're talking about. No, I'm not one of his. He's walking a little bit toward the door. He moves a little bit closer to the escape. And there's something really interesting here. Charcoal fire. Look at verse 18. It says there had been a charcoal fire there, for it was cold. It makes sense that it'd be cold in the spring. You're talking about elevation. You're talking about half mile up. Jerusalem's about 2,600 feet above sea level. In that time of year, it would have been chilly at night, in the morning. And so they made a charcoal fire. But what's interesting is it's not the normal word for fire. It's charcoal fire. And that phrase, that word, actually, it's just one word, is used twice in the entire New Testament. The first one is right here in John 18. Put a pin in that. We're going to circle back to that in a little bit. All right, so first opportunity, first denial. Let's see what happens now. Verse 19, the high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answered him, I've spoken openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple area where the Jews congregate, and I said nothing in secret. Why are you asking me? Ask those who have heard what I spoke to them. Look, the people know what I said. But when he said this, one of the officers who was standing nearby struck Jesus, saying, is that the way you answer the high priest? Jesus answered him, if I've spoken wrongly, testify the wrong. But if rightly, why you strike me? So Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. And this is why I chose John as the passage to go through. Because the other gospel writers, nothing wrong with how they did it, it's under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. But they kind of segmented the denials as a section and Jesus' questionings as a section. But here, John kind of intermixes them and goes back and forth. He's showing you the parallel tracks of things that were happening at the same time that night. So while Peter is being questioned about being a disciple, Jesus is undergoing his questioning by Annas and Caiaphas. It's simultaneous action, and they could have seen what was going on. Peter and John could have seen what was going on up with Jesus being questioned. So this is not happening in a vacuum. This is happening in real time. And Peter is seeing this, seeing and hearing Jesus, seeing his Lord being struck illegally by an officer of the court, Jewish court basically, at this illegal hearing. I can't imagine what Peter was feeling. This is illegal. This is wrong. If Peter had a strong justice gene, this would be flaring up right now. Imagine he was angry. You can't do that. You don't know who he is. I can only imagine the emotion that was going through his heart and his mind in that exact moment. Then John shifts back to Peter. Verse 25. Now Simon Peter was still standing and warming himself. So they said to him, remember there are officers in the mix now, standing around this charcoal fire, not just servants and slaves. So they said to him, you're not one of his disciples as well, are you? He denied it and said, I am not. No, not me. I'm not that guy. Second opportunity, second swing and a miss. Denies Jesus again. Number two, the other gospel writers include that he took an oath this time. Would have been kind of a legally binding oath. I promise, I swear to the court, I don't have a clue who this guy is. I don't even know what you're talking about. So he's escalating his denial. And then we see in verse 26, one of the slaves of the high priest who was related to the one whose ear Peter cut off, there's a wrinkle, said, didn't I see you in the garden with him? Peter then denied it again, and immediately a rooster crowed. This is a curveball. So it appears that Peter just got ID'd by somebody from the garden who just happened to be related to the guy whose ear he cut off. You don't think that relative would be motivated to identify the guy who assaulted his relative? So he identifies Peter, this relative of Malchus, and the other writers include that he was also identified by his accent. So what kind of accent did Galileans have? Well, they had a very strong guttural accent that was unmistakable. You knew somebody was from Galilee if you just let them talk long enough. It'd be very similar to, let's say somebody is born and raised in New York City. You kind of have an idea when you talk to them. They're not from Longview, okay? Or maybe from Boston. Born and raised in Boston, in New England, you kind of have an idea that's not from around here. In the same way, somebody from the deep rural South could be identified in the Midwest or in the Northeast or on the West Coast. There's easily identifiable, look, we know you're one of his because you talk like him, and I could swear that I saw you cutting off my cousin's ear. At that point in John, it says that he denied it, which he did, but Matthew, Mark, and Luke also talk about Peter swearing and cursing, not profanity, but doubling down and tripling down. Basically, those swearing and the cursing that he would have done would have been to invoke curses on himself if what he's saying is a lie. Basically, what he was saying is, may God do to me severely. If I'm lying about any of this, I don't have a clue who he is. And may God strike me hard if anything I'm saying is not true. That's a dangerous thing to swear and to put a curse on yourself about. But he did. And we see in that moment that the rooster crows, and we see it here, but we also see the other part of it, I think, which is why this really is part of the encounter with Jesus in the week before the going to the cross. The other gospel writers not only include that the rooster crowed, but it says in other gospels that in that moment while Jesus is having this conversation and dialogue and being questioned with the officers of the court, of the Jewish court, as soon as Peter makes that third denial, Jesus looks over at him. And across that courtyard, Jesus locks eyes with Peter at his lowest moment. And that rooster crows, and he sees Jesus staring at him, and he is crushed. He is broken. In the other Gospels, they talk about him breaking down and crying, but not just crying. The way that they use that verb and the way that they are portraying it is he was broken and continually weeping. He was ugly crying and could not stop. And he fled. That's a low moment. I mean, that's actually really cinematic. I mean, I would love to see that on film, on video. But this was a crushing moment for Peter. Just Jesus looking across, uncontrollably crying, heartbroken. And I also wonder, what was Jesus's look like? When Jesus looked over at Peter, what was that look? As a parent, I've got a lot of different looks. My kids can tell you kind of what that look is by how I'm looking at them. I wonder what the look was from Jesus that night. I don't think it was anger. I don't think it was frustration. Honestly, I think it was love. I think it was compassion. knowing, Peter, I'm about to go and die for your sin. I know you're going to fail me, but I won't ever fail you. I'm going to go die for your sin, Peter. Hang in there, brother. I can only imagine an amazing story. And that's where a lot of tellings of the denials stop. Sadly, that's where a lot of stories of this denial event with Peter stop. But the good news is that's not the end of the story. Turn over to John 21. After Jesus is killed and buried and then rises again the third day, Jesus had told them that night, that Thursday night of the denial, hey, get ready, go to Galilee. Once I'm resurrected, go to Galilee. I'll meet you up there. I'll meet you at Galilee. So let's take a look at John 21, verses 1 through 3. After these things, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, that's Galilee, and he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, who was called Didymus, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, and 2 other of his disciples were there. We don't know who they were. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. They said to him, we're also coming with you. Then they went out and got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. At least part of this crew were professional fishermen. They caught nothing. Nighttime in the Sea of Galilee is actually the best time to go fishing. They caught nothing. He said, why were they there just going about their life? Well, I want you to understand, we can read these stories, and you can read this gospel. You can read about the Last Supper. You can read about the denials. You can read about this event in John 21. And we can say, whew, that's a lot of information. We're going to pause and put that down and come back to it. That's a lot to take in. I want you to understand that these guys, back in that day, they didn't have a pause button. All this was happening, swirling around them in real time, and they couldn't get off the merry-go-round. They couldn't get off. They were living it. They had not been there before. They hadn't read through the New Testament every year. They were in it, experiencing it, feeling it, the crush of it. Jesus had said, go to Galilee. So Peter and 6 more, they go fishing. They don't catch anything. Let's see, verse 4, what happens next. But when the day was now breaking, Jesus stood on the beach. Yet the disciples didn't know that it was Jesus. So Jesus said to them, children, you don't have any fish to eat, do you? They answered him, no. I love that. And he said to them, cast the net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you'll find the fish. So they cast it, and then they were not able to haul it in because of the great quantity of fish. Therefore, the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it's the Lord. So when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from the land, about 200 cubits away, dragging the net full of fish. There's a lot happening here. Couldn't find any fish. Jesus from the shore, they don't recognize him initially. Say, hey, do you guys, sirs, children, do you have any fish? And they said, no. So put on the right side of the boat, and they do, and the nets aren't even straining, but they're full of fish, and they realize. The other disciple, most scholars believe that's John. And so John always tended to be a little bit quicker on the uptake on spiritual insight than Peter. But Peter was the one who acted first. Remember, act first, think later. So this happened in a similar way at the tomb. So when they heard that morning, that Easter morning, that Jesus was not in the tomb and he wasn't there, Peter and John ran to the tomb, right? John gets there first. I like to think because he was younger and had fresher legs. I mean, I get that. As I'm getting a little bit older, I'm like, yeah, I get it why John probably would have gotten there first. But when John gets there, he stops at the open tomb and pauses to soak in the spiritual moment of what this is. The Lord is risen. Kind of like on the sea that day, he realized and discerns, that's the Lord. But at the tomb, here comes Peter. make a way, coming through. And he doesn't even stop at the entrance like John. He rushes right in and goes in to look for himself. So it's kind of the same thing in John 21. When John's out there and realizes that the miracle just happened, he's like, that's the Lord, splash. What was that? There goes Peter. He's already in the water. That's Peter. And he's going head for about 100 yards, about 200 cubits, about 100 yards to shore. And he is heading that direction, man, as fast as he can. So verse 9, so when they got out on the land, they saw a charcoal fire already made and fish placed on it, and bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish which you've now caught. So Simon Peter went up and hauled the net to land full of large fish, 153. Okay. I mean, it's a very specific number. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. None of the disciples ventured to inquire of him, who are you? Knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and the fish likewise. This was now the third time Jesus had revealed himself to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. Do you see anything interesting in verse 9 there? The charcoal fire is mentioned. Oh, yeah. This is the second and only other time charcoal fire, that word is used in the New Testament. Coincidence? I think not. The first time it's mentioned is around the fire. Peter was warming himself at the denials. Imagine the look of that fire, the smell of that fire, and the memory of that moment burned into his mind through that fire. Now we have a similar fire, similar look, similar smells. I wonder if Peter was reminded of that fateful night not long ago. But Jesus is going to transform and reshape his memory and the smells associated with that memory here. I love, Jesus is about detail. And this is a detail I don't see as accidental. By the way, this was the last recorded miracle of Jesus in the New Testament. Last recorded miracle there that he performs with the disciples. And apparently this breakfast meant so much to Peter that a lot of folks believe that's the meal he was referencing in Acts 10 when he's preaching. He talks about the meal he had with Jesus and ate with him after the resurrection, probably this morning, there in John 21. So let's see now in verse 15 how the rest of this goes for Peter. Now when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my lambs. Jesus kind of takes Peter aside. He knows Peter needs a reboot. Peter needs a reboot desperately. And he uses his original name. He doesn't call him Peter, but when he met him and called him on the Sea of Galilee, he called him Simon, son of John. It's exactly the phrase he uses here in John 21. He's rebooting Peter here. And the question he asks him in 15 is not just, do you love me, but do you love me more than these? It's interesting. Why would he ask, do you love me more than the others? Well, because Peter had boastfully, arrogantly said, even if all these others leave you and deny you, I never will. So Jesus says, do you love me more than these? And the word, and you see Peter says, yes, I do love you. And in English, it looks very similar, but it's different. It's a big difference. So the different word for love, agapao, is the word Jesus used, do you love me? And Peter's word is phileo. Yes, you know I love you, but it's very different in Greek, very intentional. The agapao is a deep devotion, a self-sacrificing, all-in, passionately pursuing kind of love above all others. Phileo is a deep brotherly affection, close relationship, but not the kind of all-in, self-sacrificing kind of love Jesus used the term for. See, what does that mean? So what? I think this is showing us that there's some humility in Peter now. He is not even confident and comfortable using the same word for love Jesus used. Yeah, I love you. I phileo you, Jesus. I think there's some humility here. Jesus sees that and he says, then graze my baby lambs. That's actually the phrase. It says tend my lambs, but it's like graze my baby lambs. I'm glad you're getting rid of your pride, Peter. There's some humility to you now. Perfect. It's exactly where I need you. Graze my baby lambs. That's the first restoration. Then in verse 16, Jesus said to him again, a second time, Simon, son of John, not Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Agapao. He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Phileo. This time it's not, do you love me more than the others? It's, do you love me? Peter says, yes, I do. But I still can't use that same word that you're using. I only feel like I can use phileo. There's a humility here in Peter. And Jesus says, great, shepherd my sheep. Second restoration. Verse 17. Last verse we'll cover today. Verse 17. Jesus, he said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because he had said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. In this third question from Jesus, he comes down to Peter's level. He says, hey, Peter, Simon, son of John, do you phileo me? He's using the same term Peter's using now. Do you love me? He matches Peter, and Peter, at this point, is just broken. He's raw. He's open. He's humble. And Jesus says, keep grazing my sheep. And the restoration is complete. 3 for 3.